right, everybody. So we are back with another Q&A with myself and Abel Csabai. How we doing, man?
I'm doing good, thank you. I've been feeling very important in the past couple of days because so I've been told that I look like
Oh
a
yeah.
certain Ruth van Nistelrooy. Oh yeah, I sent it to you guys. So I've been hearing that since I was 15, and just recently he was appointed as a temporary, but the manager of Manchester United. So like my wife was coming home on some days and saying like, "Oh my God!" Like this friend of mine said like, "Oh my, I've been staring at this guy and I was thinking like, who does he remind me of?" And then I realized it's your husband. It looks like him. So I felt so important. And then they appointed the new coach. So the beautiful period is over.
Oh man.
But it was good.
Well, if anybody is not aware, Abel is actually he appears on The Office in season 9. So if you go
Yeah,
to
that.
season 9 and look up Brian from The Office, somebody try to convince me that that is not Abel, and I will not believe you.
Yeah, like that. You sent me this video, and on the thumbnail, just like in small version, like it actually, I could totally believe that that's me on that picture. Like
Yeah.
when I look at the big, like the normal size stuff, not as much, but I can definitely see what you're seeing.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So before we get into some of these submitted questions, I had people just generally ask if I was going to touch on anything with the Jeff Nippard thing. And so I don't really have too much that wasn't, I didn't make a video on it because somebody actually sent it to me before I saw it organically. And one of the things that's tough, I think, with, me doing this kind of just like a side fun project is it's hard to do current event things. So if you look at somebody like a Nick Strength and Power with pro bodybuilding, that's literally the job is he will figure out like what happened today in bodybuilding and comment on it. And there's a lot of channels like that. Greg Doucette, of course, and other ones where it's like they're basically current events channels. And I just it's not something I could really do other than occasionally put out like a short or on something. Because by the time I sit down and make a video on it and then have it edited, it's just, it's like weeks later. So I didn't really have anything to add there. Other than that, it was just kind of crazy to see because you hear about some of these roid rage incidents or you see people talk about stuff. But my initial thought is not only was it ridiculous, but just how stupid somebody has to be to do that. Like not like people talking about like, oh, like what a child and absolutely it's emotionally just ridiculous and immature and so many flaws with it. But even if you take that away, even if you're like, nope, you're just gonna act like an immature idiot, how stupid do you have to be to do that in a gym where somebody has a camera, you work there, so you know there's security cameras, to one of the biggest influencers in the fitness space where you're literally going to have millions of people aware of this thing and just assume that nothing's going to happen. I mean, again, you have to be so dumb to actually think that. Like that was my first thought. It's just like what a
Yeah.
complete moron. In addition to, of course, all the additional stuff of him being immature and completely overreacting to a video. I mean, there's so many things wrong with it. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's why as far as the incident itself, my main thought was honestly just curiosity, like why or what was going on there because you know the thing itself, the fact that he did it, I mean he's one of those guys that pretty much just tries to hold a banner up constantly that like I am dangerous. Like you
right.
should be scared of me, right? Like everything about his looks, the way he communicates, he's not nice to his audience on purpose. I mean, I don't know how he's in comment sections and stuff, but I watched a couple of his videos during my crazy high back training phase because he does a lot of stuff on back training. But yeah, so that was not that shocking that he would do something like that. But at the same time, it is because, he's a public figure. And then as far as things you can do that is just going to be PR suicide, like Jeff Nippard might just be the worst person to do this with because
Yeah.
so not only is he really big and really famous and popular, but I mean, he might be the one fitness influencer I can think of who I would not be shocked if there was never a single person who like truly like hated him out of his followers because like what are you going to hate on? Like okay, maybe you're gonna think that he's a bit annoying or something. Out of like of everybody, somebody's going to think that at least like a few people. But Jeff is I mean, he never got into any sort of internet beef, even when Greg Doucette was like trashing his girlfriend left and right. Even then, I think the most he did was just leaving a very polite comment under Greg's video to give some extra context or something. And so he's a non-divisive, overwhelmingly positively viewed person. And then on top of that, like even if all of that was not the case, he's much, much smaller than him. So even if like as a neutral, you're looking at it, you don't even know who the two people are, even then you're going to think badly of him.
Sure.
So it's just like such a bad move from a self-promo perspective that like what would spark him to do that? And I mean, really, I mean, I said this to you, but the only thing I can really think of is that, yeah, like just the hormones that he's using at the moment, just, I don't know, like just got the better of him in the moment and then made him do something which like 10 minutes later he was regretting really dearly, but it was too late. But I don't know, like what else could it be?
Yeah, I'm interested to see what happens with that. I hope that Jeff, in this case, I know it's easy to just say, I mean, like, oh, hey, don't worry about it. I don't know. I think for something like this, I don't want to get too much into like the legality of it, but I think there obviously should be consequences to something like that, just 'cause it's just so ridiculous. But yeah, that's my main
Yeah.
thoughts on it.
Apart from that, like I have one thought on this, which is to me a lot more interesting, and that is like to me, it's kind of interesting that anytime something like this happens, the people who end up in a much worse light in my eyes than the actual like aggressors or like culprits or the people that are associated with them and that are going to be making comments on what happened. And it's just mind blowing to me that adult people that are public figures and like supposedly they are like somewhat trained as far as how to communicate about, you know, like sensitive topics and, you know, like things that happened who involve people that they are involved with, just fail so miserably again and again and again to make some sort of reasonable commentary on this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like Fuad Abiad,
Oh yeah.
I watched his
Friends with
video
everybody.
and it's you know, I get it that like, okay, you're a public person, this is your friend is also a public person, and so they did something really messed up, and now people are expecting you to make some sort of commentary on this. Hopefully you also don't think that this was particularly great. So assuming that, you kind of have to, like, it's expected of you that you're going to express that in one way or another, but at the same time you don't want to stab your friend in the back, like you want to be there for them, which I think is a good mindset to have within reason. So I get it that it's not easy, but I also think that it's not at all an impossibility. Like it very much can be done. And I feel like just so many things could have been said by Fuad, for example. Like, I mean, it's something as simple as like, listen, what he did was wrong. I definitely don't condone that sort of behavior. And, you know, like if you know him, that's not his usual self. And I can tell you that he regrets it very dearly, even if that's not true. Just say it, whatever.
Mm.
Or say it, I'm sure he regrets it very dearly. We haven't had the chance to sit down and talk about it. And I'm going to tell him that because that's what friends do. But listen, if you're expecting me to cancel him or to never have him on my show, no, like he made a big mistake and I'm sure he's going to own up to it, whatever, something like that. But then he does the worst possible thing, which is what I hate the most, by the way, when you're like trying to take your audience for a fool, but not by like lying to them or something, but by pretending that you don't get it. So it's like, you know, people who turn away from their friends because something bad has happened to them. It's like, what? Like, why do you use those words? Like, nothing happened to your friend. Like, and like, I'm not going to cancel my friend. Nobody's expecting you to cancel your friend. So it's just this really annoying bullshitting around the whole thing.
Sure.
It's just so cringeworthy, and I don't understand how he cannot do better than that.
I didn't watch the video, but I've heard that generally as well.
Yeah, it's just no good.
Yeah, I think in general, within his industry, there's a lot of stuff that just like, I don't know, the temperaments and the personalities that often get to the top, quote unquote, the top, like the most shine, are just oftentimes people who are not the most, again, quote unquote, normal, you know, and we see that with a lot of instances with like Liver King and everything. I just saw somebody post about his whole I don't follow him obviously, but like just craziness that's going on with that. But anyway, that's enough of the
Yeah.
drama stuff. So let's get into some questions here. So this is by the Church of Csabai. I've had
hmm
recurring forearm tenderness in the brachioradialis, so I'm currently deloading my upper body training. No pain, but was just wondering if you had any experience with this. I figured it's from overuse from lifting, yet my training volume isn't crazy high.
So yeah, I mean, definitely had experience with that. In my experience, like anything in and around the forearm, yeah, it tends to be overuse and it tends to just come about very randomly and also tends to go away just as randomly. Like I think you may actually recall I was actually messaging you and like you guys were helping me out and like giving me some sort of over like what is it called via the internet, basically some
Hmm.
brief diagnosis on what it could be and whether we actually cracked what it was or not. I guess I shall never know. But the thing is that it just followed the same curve as any other type of injury tends to, or tendinosis or little inflammation type issues, that it was like peaking more or less like on day 2 or something. And then on day 3, it was a little bit better. Day 4, probably it went away. I mean, it also went away much faster than most other injuries. Like anytime I had something like that, and when clients had something like this, it was also very similar and like freaking out initially, like, oh my God, what is this? Let's identify it. Should I go to a physio? Usually I said like, well, I would wait if tomorrow maybe it will already have gone away. And often it does. Like it's just rarely something serious in my experience, but maybe you have something different.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully it's not generally, I mean, you don't hear about people tearing their forearm muscles generally,
Yeah.
right? So, what I will say, so I've experienced that it was only about a year ago, and I experienced it when I was doing pull-ups 3 days a week, and it was only a short period of time. I usually do upper body twice a week, and then I started adding one extra day of pull-ups, like 4 sets, and maybe occasionally here and there. But the total volume still wasn't that crazy, but it was a lot of that movement. And so I basically dropped that entirely. I didn't drop back work, but I went significantly higher rep and dropped pull-ups. And it's actually only recently that I dropped pull-ups. So, people often know that I do a lot of pull-ups, or I used to, and it was a big exercise for me. And for well over a decade it has been. But I did decide to drop it for the first time. And honestly, it felt kind of good to get back to just like a lat pull down and some other stuff and take the ego out of the pull-ups. So I haven't done heavy pull-ups since then. So I think it is both volume dependent and exercise dependent for sure. And so that's the only thing I would say is like if you have already deloaded your upper body and you're not experiencing pain, I would say you can either gradually reintroduce what you were doing or just change exercise selection if you really just don't want to deload that much. You can always just try different things because sometimes it's even a matter of like I at the same time I was doing heavy reverse easy bar curl. And once I stopped doing that in the pull-ups, so it was hard to say exactly which one was the culprit there. But in any case, I do think that both are going to be a factor.
Yeah, yeah, like just to touch on the specifics, like usually, usually actually, well, I wouldn't say usually, but often, forearm pain is actually just some elbow issue, which like maybe that's where it sort of radiated, or that's what you're feeling, but the underlying thing is some sort of elbow issue. So often the things that you would be doing to manage elbow pain or to prevent it will also be good for that. So yeah, like definitely going lighter, higher rep is always going to be a good idea whenever something hurts, especially if it's some like mysterious stuff like this. You don't exactly know what's causing it. It's just a safe bet to, yeah, just drop the load, go from your 8 RMs to 15 RMs or something for a couple of
Mhm.
days. And I mean, definitely with pull-ups, chin-ups, anything like that, like if you can make it so that your wrist can rotate, so you're not forced into pronated or supinated grip, that is definitely going to help. So yeah, like just do basically all the things that would be recommended for elbow pain is probably like a safe bet that it's going to be helpful for that as well.
Yep. All right. So Angelo James. Hey, bro, I have a question. Is it okay to do bro splits even if I'm an early intermediate, or is upper lower a much better option? Lifting for 2 years now. I'm stuck with my lifts and my physique.
Um, that's funny because stuck in past tense, also being stuck, like that was a big, I just couldn't wrap my head around it for a long time.
Oh,
So you will get there. Um, do you want to go first on this one?
sure. Yeah, so we definitely talked about splits before, and back when I started getting into lifting, there was so much conversation about splits. I mean, it was like there was a whole big thread on T Nation, do this split, not that one. And I mean that's basically what training programs were. It was like, what is the split you're doing? And you could break it up this way and that way. I mean, it was just seen as such a huge thing and so much time spent on doing this versus this. If you order it this way, it's going to be 3 days before you're hitting the same muscle versus this way is 4 days. I mean, it was just massive. And it's not for me to say that it doesn't matter because I do think it matters, but it does not matter nearly as much as some of these other factors. And so if you're doing a bro split, especially if you're doing a bro split where you're hitting some other muscle groups multiple times a week, like for example, the only real one time per week would be push pull legs, if you can even like call that a bro split. But if you're doing a bro split like like delts and arms and then like chest back and then legs or something, and then I mean there's a million iterations, you're generally still hitting everything more than once, maybe other than legs. So all that to say, I think if you're enjoying it, you can do it. Like I think it's really fine. I would focus much more on the volume and the intensity and the exercise selection. You might see small differences between a better and worse split in this instance, but I wouldn't worry about it too much. I do an upper lower split for a lot of reasons. I like the antagonistic supersets, and I think it's a really nice way to go about it. But I think either is fine if you really like it.
Yeah. I mean, it's especially when you're earlier in your training development, you can you can get away with more, or actually a better way to say it would be that you simply, like the small differences are going to be overpowered by just the sheer magnitude of results that you can still get. So if you're an early intermediate, I don't know based on what exactly you determine that, but that is someone that I would define by like still being able to put on like 10 plus pounds or more of muscle a year. Like that is a lot of muscle. I mean, that amount of muscle is physique changing or physique defining. And so, at that point, if you're going to get like 10% more gains or something, or 20% more gains, which would actually be quite a lot by following an upper lower split or a bro split, you're not going to notice that. Whereas later, when it's a matter of like, okay, if I distribute my training this way, let's say you're doing a bro split, it's going to be actually just really difficult to get enough high quality work within any one session. Then if you transition to something else, which it might give you less than 20% difference in results, but that little bit of extra edge that you can get by distributing your work differently over the course of the week, I mean, that can actually be the difference between you making gains or not making gains. And these are the little discoveries that people make along the way. Like Eric Helms many times talked about how like he was stuck on his bench press for God knows how long. And then he started benching basically every time he went to the gym, which would have been like 4 or 5 days a week. And then all of a sudden, things started to take off. I'm pretty sure I could dig. Oh yeah, like actually I was stuck on my bench as well, and I was benching once a week. I was following this 3-day split, and instead of that, I started benching twice a week, and I did like 5 sets of like escalating, like going heavier in each set. Basically, I was doing 5 sets of 4 in one session, 5 sets of 6 on the other session. I just did that, and that made me go from 82 kilos for 5 reps, I think, to 92 kilos in a very short time. So, there are little things like this. But otherwise, I would echo what Dave said.
That reminded me of two things. So the first was, we're talking about the increased frequency. So I got set up with Michael from Boostcamp to be, on the app and everything. And I was like,
Hmm.
okay, cool. So I do have people med moves I have in my show notes and everything. There's a little link to sign up for Boostcamp through me, so feel free to do that. But I was like, like I'll put on a program there. It's a program that I've modified over the years, and it helped me with my overhead press and my bench press. So I was like, okay, I'll put that on there. And again, obviously, like I don't really care too much about like people's views on it and whatnot, but I just was out of curiosity checked, and there was like three reviews, and it was like a 5 star or 1 star to 3 star. So I was like, okay, well, let me see what this is. And the 3 star review was, I haven't started the program yet, but because this was like a week into having it on there. It's like I haven't started the program yet, but I'm just going to put this review here and I'll update it as I go. And I actually no, I'm sorry, that was the 1 star review. And maybe they changed it along the way. And I was like, okay, if you haven't done it yet, why would you give it a 1 star review just to like update
Yep.
it? Like, why not start with five or something, or even three and go from there?
You're unlocking your new levels.
Yeah, yeah. And then right. And then I think I checked back later out of curiosity and it wasn't updated. So I was like, okay. And then the other review was somebody who was like, well, I'm like beginner and intermediate, and I put on 10 pounds on my overhead press and bench press. I've only been doing it for 1 week, but like I would expect more for a specialization phase. And it's not like for a full routine. And I'm like, bitch, this is an overhead press or bench press specialization routine. And you just put 10 pounds on in a week? What are you talking about? So I just
Yeah,
thought it
damn.
was,
Like,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not even supposed to work that fast. So
Right,
you're,
right. No, I just
um,
thought it was funny. So if people are curious, you can go check out. It's just a high frequency pressing program that, technically falls under daily undulating periodization. And for both of those presses, it helped me quite a bit. So if people are interested in that, feel free to go to Boostcamp and give it a 5 stars for the awesome
yeah.
program.
And I also want to say, what's the name of Boostcamp guy? Michael?
Michael, yeah.
Listen, Michael, what's your problem with me, man, huh? Like now I'm the only one. I'll check my Instagram phone. If I don't see a private message, I'm going to be very, very upset. Just
Right,
kidding.
right. The other thing that made me think about was I don't know how much you remember, like it was last year, and we were talking about me doing a bro split, and I was like, just to give me something to be excited about before. And in
Hmm.
theory, I really liked it. I was like, okay, it's been years since I've done a bro split. I've been doing this upper lower forever. It'll be fun. I can go in, I can just crush it on chest. I can go in, I can just crush it back or whatever. Legs I already do separately, so that would be kind of the same. But I'll just crush arms. I did it for a week and a half. And I will say it was also around the time when I got really sick last year, so that obviously threw a wrench in things. But I just immediately did not like it. I did
Hmm.
chest, and I was like, okay, I did my first exercise, but now I got to, and then my second exercise. So my second exercise was obviously weaker than it normally would be because normally it would be fresh. And then my third
Yeah.
exercise, I'm finding something else to do, but it was okay. And I got out of there in 40, 45 minutes. I was like, that was pretty sweet. And then I went to do back. And I was like, I'm warming up, and I'm like, well, I just warmed up with the back set. Normally, I'd go and start warming up something else, but I don't. I'm just doing back, so I guess I'm just waiting. And then I do another warm up set, and I finally get started. First exercise goes as expected, but now my second exercise is weaker. And I'm like, well, obviously it's going to be weaker, of course, but just mentally that's annoying. And of course, I'd adapt to it, obviously, but it was just like, ugh, I'm doing similar exercises, but it's just different weight. And then I'm getting to my third back exercise. And again, between every set, I'm kind of like, all right, I'd normally go do another muscle group. So I'm actually getting less rest between sets of back because let's say I'm resting 4 minutes between, but normally I might rest 2 to 3 minutes, do a set of, let's say, chest, then 2 to 3 minutes do a set of back. So I'm actually getting less rest between sets of back, but I still feel like I'm waiting around forever to do my next set. And then they're weaker than they normally would be. And then I'm having to find like an extra back exercise that I normally wouldn't do. And I finished it and I was just like, I just didn't really like that. And I know like it's so
Mm.
common for so many people to do that split. And part of it is certainly just because I've gotten used to doing this. But I just felt like I was just sitting around. I don't know. I really just didn't like it. I couldn't see myself going back to it. I could see a split I used to do that I got from Tom Venuta way, way back in the day was delts and arms, chest, back, legs, because then you can still superset and get the antagonistic supersets and everything going. So I could
Yeah.
see that. I just don't really have a reason to do that over an upper lower. So I don't see myself doing it, but I could at least see that kind of split. But like a pure bro split of one body part per muscle group, or sorry, one body part per workout, it's just not for me.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think like the thing that always bothers me about bro splits whenever I play around with the thought, because I also had a bunch of these little. I'm pretty sure that we were talking about it like kind of together. That like, yeah, I totally. I'm planning on trying it out, and it's like, yeah, me too. But the thing that always kind of bothers me is just the like when I think it over, how much more I'm trashing a body part in a session and how much more I will feel like I have trashed it, but relatively speaking, how much less the quality work I'm going to be
Mhm.
doing across the week, or how much more difficult it is to get in what otherwise would seem like a moderate amount of volume. And I mean, the higher frequency training you're used to or what you're normally doing, like the more that's going to be the case. I mean, if you're doing like some true full body sessions like daily, for example, I mean, really like in any given session, you barely feel like you really did any real damage to the muscle once you're used to it and you're not getting sore anymore and all of that. But like, getting in 20 sets a week is so easy. And even if you're doing like 2, 3 sessions, it's really, really hard to match that in just one session if you're gonna be going for a true bro split. So that's a little bit of a thing. Plus also like if you're doing at least like 2, 3 sessions for your upper body in general, then like at least you're always gonna feel like your shoulders and arms are like kind of perma pumped throughout the
Right,
week,
right.
at least a little bit. But honestly, just one last thing before I shut up. I almost feel like at this point that splits are better looked at in terms of how you're going to organize it across the week. Like you should be looking at your gym setup and what's convenient more so than any sort of theoretical optimization. I almost feel
Mhm.
like that at this point. Like for you now, are you only training at home at this point?
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So I mean, it's very cool because you know your setup and like what's convenient to pair up with what. And I don't have a setup as complete as you, but I have this cable dual pulley system, and like, yeah, I know that okay, like if I do a lateral raise, like that's very convenient to pair up with a bicep curl, and I can do some other stuff with like let's say I can do lat prayers or something like that with on the other side of the pulley. So I mean it's very simple. So in your gym, like okay, if I'm going to be doing like let's say Smith machine squats, like okay, might as well do some Smith machine bench presses after that there or something because like it will be just an easy transition, less likelihood of having to wait for equipment. So it's more of a logistical thing for me at this point.
Yeah, yeah, and I would say that that is true with the home gym aspect. Like if anything, I underestimated how nice it is to have a home gym, and I always wanted one, but it's just, man, it's just so nice to be able to go down there and do what I want to do and everything. Obviously, it's not required, but if you can get some stuff set up at home and you have that luxury, it's great.
Yeah, for me
All
it's
right,
difficult because my cat always takes up my bench, but that's a
yeah.
different story.
So Alt Baby 2024 asks, any advice on how to get through med school while consistently lifting? And I think I told them that it was in a Q&A because I remembered the question, but it must have been actually one of the newest ones. So we'll get to that now, actually. And then, for Abel, for your part, you can just kind of sub in instead of med school, just any like super busy period that you've had. Um,
Yeah.
so I'll
Uh,
just say for me, it when I think in general, and I know it's such a cliche to say everybody's got the same amount of time in the day because you got the same 24 hours, but obviously very different. There are huge differences in how busy people can be. And I will say, I just think it comes down to either priorities, you could word it like that, or I kind of think of it as tiers. So I think of when I have tasks to do, I think of like my A tier, my B tier, my C tier. And the reality is you're often just never going to get to those C tier things. These are things like, hey, got this room I need to clean up, but it doesn't really enhance my life to do it. It's like if I have nothing else I need to do. So I'll give an example actually of like my passport is expired and I need to renew it. And I think you have 5 years from the time that it expires when you can still renew it online, but past 5 years you have to go in person. I think somebody can correct me. And so that was, I have to check how long ago that was, but that was maybe it was 3 years ago, whatever. And I'm not really traveling out of the country right now. I don't really care. So it's barely it's like B, C tier. And so I just have to have so much else done for it to be like, well, what else could I possibly do with my time? I guess I'll choose to go get my passport done. But if we suddenly schedule a vacation, okay, now that's an A tier and I really need to get that done. And so I think it's just a matter of making lifting an A tier thing. So for me, throughout all of school, sleep and lifting were top priorities. Like before socializing, before other stuff. I mean, sometimes even before studying. Like I knew people who did far worse than I did. And they talk about all these all-nighters. I probably have had less than 5 times where I have gotten less than 4 hours of sleep because of studying. Like it just never really happened. I mean, typically I would get 7 or 8. Occasionally it would be 6. And that was through all the schooling that I had and while doing very well because it was just like that. It's just got to happen. And same thing with lifting. Like there's just not a world where I'm saying, well, I'm not lifting. Now, again, are there going to be some occasional life circumstances where that's not an option? Sure. And of course, like if you've got 3 kids and a stressful job, that's where maybe you have to do like 3 home workouts that are half an hour, each or something. But I really just think part of that is the mindset. And as hard as certain things can be, it's very hard to convince me that you can't get in three, like I said, 40-minute sessions, let's say, of lifting a week. It's just almost impossible for me to believe if you are somebody who is intelligent enough to be in med school in the first place, for example. So that I
Yeah.
don't really have any special advice other than just saying you just have to do it. You have to make it a priority and you have to move some other things around and determine where it falls for you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that actually changes a little bit what I'm going to say because I was going to say that, okay, like I actually don't know exactly how things are different in med school. I studied environmental science, which was time intensive, but like I know that, like you doc folks, like you can get stuck in like labs for many hours and whatever, but we didn't have to do so much of that. But it's, I think, just something that we have to learn for ourselves that there are so many more minutes and hours in the day that we use inefficiently than we think. And like you just really need to be just so incredibly busy to like literally not have the hours in the day to get stuff done. I'm pretty sure that I'm quoting this from someone like word for
Yeah.
word. And now as I said it, like it sounded very familiar in my head. But it's usually what ends up happening is that you're just like you get through all your obligations, and by the end of it, you're just so drained, like mentally and emotionally. Maybe I'm still putting word for word. This also sounded very familiar. That you just simply don't feel like you just don't have the battery power at this point to get what you need done. And I mean that's especially like yeah when you come from the office, coming from school, like you just want to get home, want to get your food, and you just want to chill. And it's like okay, like now the thought of like still going to the gym and like change and then train and then change back and then go home, like it can just be easily at the point like you can be at the point by the end of the day when you feel like I just cannot be bothered. And I mean that's when you sometimes just gotta will yourself like okay, that's my system, like I'm done with my stuff, I'm just straight gonna go to the gym and I'm not gonna be thinking about it. Sometimes that's what's needed, but other times really it's we are just wasting so much time with little inefficiencies during the day, which by the way, like including that, like going to the gym, I'm pretty sure that we talked about that
Mhm.
like the whole process of going there, changing, messing around with your phone a little bit too much, it just takes so much more time than what's actually needed. Like something that could take an hour including the workout and commuting and everything might take like 4 hours, like on a weekend, let's say. It's not even an exaggeration. So yeah, it can be useful to do some of these exercises that some of these like productivity gurus are recommending. Like actually like note down like every minute what did you do outside of like okay attending lectures and whatever. You might
Yeah, no,
find some
that
interesting
can
stuff.
be because I find that myself as well, where like by the time you've gotten up, brush your teeth, getting ready, go to the bathroom, you maybe make a shake, you warm up, you work out, and like it's like this 40-minute workout or an hour workout, like process is 3 hours. I'm like, what the heck just happened? Which
Yeah.
is why I feel like I agree when people say you can't really multitask. I mostly agree, but I would not consider like listening to a podcast this big multitasking thing. So I'm usually listening to something that I try to make productive, or a lecture or something if I'm doing continuing education. So I try to still utilize that time. But yeah, I definitely agree there.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, this one looks a little bit longer. Grand Voyager 92. Unrelated to the topic, I recently watched your How to Get 17 plus inch arms video and I have a question. You mentioned having 4 different exercises for biceps and triceps in a week. I currently have 2 for each muscle group, but I want to add more volume because progress is slow for one of the bicep movements. In such cases, what do you think is the proper order to go about things? Change exercise first and stay with 4 sets per week, or add volume and keep the number of exercises the same, or add an exercise? In general, do you think there'd be any benefit of doing 6 sets with 3 exercises rather than 6 sets with 2 exercises? I'd like to hear your opinion on this. Thanks. So basically, you're kind of stalled out and you're just wondering, should I be adding an exercise? Should I just be trying adding volume? Should I switch to exercise entirely? Just kind of like, where do you go from there?
So I think that for biceps, are we talking about biceps only or also triceps?
Well, it's talking about getting 17-inch arms. It sounds like the bicep movement, one of his bicep exercises, is what has slowed down significantly.
Uh-huh. So I think that for biceps, 2 exercises that are working well with you in terms of like feeling good and also just nicely overloadable, and you just also enjoy doing them. I think can carry you pretty much all the way. Like more exercises or basic, like that should be a function of adding them in to get in more volume, where otherwise you would either have to do just a crazy amount of sets per exercise, or you would have to do some exercises so frequently to where like you could get into some overuse injury sort of issues. But for me now, if I wanted to do some crazy bicep specialization thing, I would say I would still do probably like drag curls, cable curls, Bayesian curls, whatever. So basically standing or sitting, and cable is behind you, and I would do that dumbbell preacher curl on a relatively vertical bench. Those two, I would do like 2 to 3 sets, 2 to 3 times a week. And I mean, if you add that up, if my math checks out, that I mean, so 2 to 3 times each. So if you do the math, I mean, that's anywhere from like 8 to 12 sets.
Hmm.
If you do both of them twice a week, 3 sets each, I mean, that's pretty good. Am I getting that right? I'm getting that right, right? Yeah. So, Jesus Christ. Sorry, my cat. My cat is attempting to, yeah, do that. So, I think that if you find that you need a lot more volume than that, then yeah, adding in a third exercise just so you don't need to do them more than twice a week each is warranted. But that's pretty much my cutoff. Like twice a week an exercise is still okay. I don't like to go in frequency higher than that because just for safety. Like the more often you repeat something that you're also trying to like overload, you can start pissing off your joints.
Sure.
So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I think for something like biceps, as Abel was saying, I don't think you really need more than 2 to 3 exercises. So I do I really do 3 exercises. So on both upper days, I'm doing 2 bicep movements, but on one, it is a cable curl followed by an incline dumbbell curl. And on the other day, I actually just changed it, but it's a reverse cable curl and then incline dumbbell curl. So they're really pretty similar. Um, and the incline dumbbell curls are identical, just slightly different weights. One day is a little heavier than the other. So I don't think you're going to see much of a difference other than, again, with some hand positioning. So basically, I was doing rope cable curls, so that was more of a neutral position. It was just kind of getting annoying to grip it. So I just changed that to reverse. But other than that, I don't get too complicated with it. So I think that, like, if you were asking me about back, I would probably say there's more utility in changing exercises. Whereas for this, I think you can change the exercise, but I don't know if I would look at or expect huge differences. I think adding a little bit of volume can be helpful. I will say, like, that is probably one of the differences from this year compared to next. I didn't really notice much of a difference cutting down. But if I, really squint and I look at the measurements and say, okay, was there any progress? One thing is at the same weight and the same waistline, my arms are maybe close to a quarter inch bigger. It's maybe 2 to 3 sixteenths of an inch, but something that like every time I'm measuring, I'm getting that. And the main difference I would say is that last summer when I decided to bulk up, I did add more volume. So instead of just doing 3 sets of biceps and triceps at the end of each upper, I was doing six. So basically, I went from 6 sets a week to 12. So six is pretty low. Now, of course, you obviously have all the indirect work as well, but now it's 12 direct sets each per week. And, this is where I would make a video as an influencer and say, this dramatically increased my arms and like absolute arm explosion and everything. And the reality is, most people probably can't tell a difference. But at this stage of the game, if I'm able to put 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch on my arms, I consider that awesome. So, that's something that I would say I did seem to notice a little bit of an improvement there, as far as I can tell, with a little bit more volume.
Yep.
Your cat looks like a meme cat right now, man. Just this fat cat just chilling, sitting there,
So she's
disapproving.
so she definitely got fatter, but not as fat as what she seems here. Like that's why I was like smiling at that. Like even the way she's like curling up her feet, like it
Yeah,
looks like chunkier than what it is.
it's funny. All right, let's see. Kyle. So Kyle says, "Hey Dave, I'm 32 years old. I've been lifting since I was 15. My diet is good. I lift 5 to 6 days a week and ensure I'm reaching at least 8,000 steps a day. I'm roughly 14 to 70% body fat, and I recently had blood work done only to find out that my LDL levels were a bit high and my HDL was slightly over the minimum, which is concerning. Cholesterol issues run in my family. I know you mentioned on the podcast you also pay attention to your cholesterol. What have you found, if anything, to help your cholesterol levels? I'm wanting to get this under control and avoid medication. Thanks, Dave. Love your podcast." All right. So I don't know if you've done anything with like lipid testing, Abel.
So yeah, this was never like a big focus for me. Like I have my understanding of how all of this works, but if you actually looked into this in more detail, then
Yeah, yeah, sure. So this is something that I've actually spent a lot of time looking into and thinking about for the last year or so. So I will make a video on this. I've been talking about this for literally months now. I just kept doing more and more experimentation. So I will make a video before the end of the year, I would say, on kind of comprehensively what I've been doing. So my cholesterol was always fine. I always had good HDL. LDL, they say you want it. Some tests actually say less than 130. You really want it less than 100 by these parameters. And I was kind of always around that 100 level and it was creeping up, creeping up. And for years now, it's been 120 to 130. And it was kind of like, well, it's not bad and other things are good, but more and more the evidence I see points towards high LDL and ApoB being an independent risk factor for cardiovascular disease. And so would it be better at a younger age to kind of get this corrected? And I think the answer is yes. And so I would generally like to avoid medications. So I was like, okay, but I had some weird period from 2021 or 22. I'd have to look back. And it was a 5 or 6 month period where I just inexplicably had lower LDL levels, sub 100. And I mean, after many measurements above 120. And I mean, this is when I was eating a lot of like Indian food and then it was nothing that I was doing diet wise for sure. It's very hard for me to explain. And the only other thing I had was I was doing more frequency of training, but that wouldn't really have much of an effect. And,
mm,
we're talking like an extra lift per week or something. So I don't really know how to explain that. So in any case, then I bulked up more recently to 210, 215, and that's when I had my highest measurement at 142. So I have, people listening may know I've cut down. I'm sitting around like 180, 185 these days. And that I'm sure had a factor. I mean, that I'm sure was a factor as far as lowering LDL. But the biggest difference was this low saturated fat experiment I did. And again, I'll detail it all in the video, but basically doing less than 10 to 15 grams of saturated fat a day lowered my LDL from a high of 142 to a low of 67, which is a dramatic change. I mean, more than you'd see on like a lot of statin studies, a huge change. The issue was that even just adding one pretty big cheat per week, like a big pizza meal or something like that, brought me back up to like low 90s. So that's a big difference between zero and one cheat per week. So again, I know I keep alluding to it, but I will really break down exactly what I did in the video on this. But suffice it to say, there's a lot of evidence to show that lowering your saturated fat decreases LDL. Lowering your dietary cholesterol doesn't do a whole lot, although for some people it can lower it a little bit, but saturated fat being a bigger factor there. So if you're really against any medication, I would say try to really dramatically lower your saturated fat. And then I'll discuss a little bit about what I might experiment medication wise as well. But that's the biggest thing is going to be your saturated fat. Higher fiber will also decrease it to some degree. And lifestyle factors, again, exercise and all of that can have a small role as well. But diet can definitely do that.